Why do some leaders inspire loyalty, innovation, and action, while most struggle to create real impact? In Start With Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action, Simon Sinek breaks down a simple but powerful truth. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Using a mix of leadership stories, business case studies, and science-backed insights, Sinek introduces the golden circle. First why, then how, then what. This framework has helped launch movements, build cult-following brands, and transform companies from the inside out. In this video from Detailed Book Summaries, we unpack Sinek's key ideas: why defining your purpose matters more than perfect messaging, how great leaders spark action by building emotional trust, and what it takes to lead with clarity and conviction. You'll walk away with actionable lessons you can apply to your business, team, or personal mission. If you're ready to lead with purpose and inspire meaningful action wherever you go, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another powerful summary from Detailed Book Summaries.
Chapter 1: Assume you know. Let's begin with a question, one you've probably never asked out loud, but one that's silently shaped how you judge others, how you build your career, and how you define leadership. The question is this: why do some leaders and organizations inspire, while others simply operate? Simon Sinek opens Start With Why not by offering answers, but by challenging our assumptions. Because the truth is, most people and businesses can explain what they do. A smaller number can explain how they do it, but almost none can clearly articulate why. And no, to make a profit isn't a real answer. Profit is a result. Why is something deeper. It's a purpose, a belief, a cause. It's the reason you get out of bed in the morning. And it's the reason anyone else should care. In this first chapter, Sinek describes a simple but powerful idea. Most people start with what? Great leaders start with why. He walks us through the classic trap of assumptions. Most of us assume that the information in front of us is enough. We assume we know what our customers want, what our employees need, and what makes a brand successful. But what we really do is reverse engineer the surface-level patterns, copying strategies without understanding the belief system behind them. Think about this. If I asked you why Apple is so successful, you might say it's because of great design, powerful marketing, or a visionary leader like Steve Jobs. Those are all true, but they're not the full story. Plenty of companies have brilliant design and marketing. What separates Apple isn't what they do, it's why they do it. Apple exists to challenge the status quo. They believe in thinking differently. That belief, that why, shows up in every product they create, every ad they write, every experience they deliver. That's why people don't just buy Apple, they join Apple. Sinek calls this pattern the golden circle. At the outer layer is what you do. In the middle is how you do it. And at the center is why you do it. Most people start from the outside in. But inspired leaders and organizations move from the inside out. They start with why. Here's where this chapter gets real. Sinek isn't talking about marketing fluff or mission statements stuck in a drawer. He's talking about a biological truth. The part of the brain responsible for behavior and decision-making, the limbic brain, doesn't understand language. It understands emotion, trust, and belief. That's why facts and figures don't drive decisions. We feel our way into loyalty. We justify it with logic later. In short, people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. So when you look at companies that inspire Apple, Southwest Airlines, Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement, it's not because they had the best data. It's because they had clarity of purpose. They knew their why, and they used it to drive every how and what that followed. And this isn't just about business. This is personal. It's about how we lead, how we communicate, how we connect. Starting with why separates those who play the short game of results from those who build legacies that last. Sinek leaves us with a challenge in Chapter 1. Stop assuming you know why you do what you do. Stop assuming that others do either. If you can't clearly articulate your purpose, if you can't communicate your belief, then you're already being outpaced by someone who can. This chapter is a wake-up call. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more meaning. If you want to lead, not just manage, not just sell, then you need to know what you believe and you need the courage to lead with it. That's where inspiration begins. That's where trust is born. And that's where we begin. Chapter 2, Carrots and Sticks. If Chapter 1 introduced us to the why, Chapter 2 reveals the battlefield where that why either thrives or dies: motivation. And the question Simon Sinek asks here cuts through all the flashy sales pitches and incentive plans. What really drives people to act? The answer, he says, is not what we think. In traditional business logic, motivation is about carrots and sticks. Offer people a reward or threaten them with a punishment, and they'll do what you want. Simple, mechanical, transactional. But here's the problem. While that strategy may work for getting a quick sale or enforcing compliance, it never builds loyalty. It never inspires. And it certainly doesn't spark movements. Sinek walks us through how businesses have been using manipulation as a tool for decades. Price drops, promotions, fear, peer pressure, even novelty. These tactics work for a moment, but they're short-term fixes. They don't create trust. They create dependency. Worse, they teach customers to expect manipulation as the norm. And once that's your baseline, you have to keep manipulating just to stay in the game. Let's take an example. A company slashes prices to drive sales. It works. Sales spike. But when prices go back up, customers vanish. Why? Because they weren't loyal to the brand, they were loyal to the deal. And the deal is gone. Manipulations are seductive. They're easy to implement and easy to measure. But here's the catch, they're also exhausting. The moment you stop pushing the incentive button, behavior stops too. There's no momentum, no loyalty, no meaning. You've created a transactional relationship, not an emotional one. Sinek contrasts that with what happens when leaders operate from a clear why. People don't just follow, they believe. And when they believe, you don't need to dangle carrots or wave sticks. You simply lead, and they follow because they want to, not because they're paid to. And this is where the idea of trust enters the scene. Trust is the currency of human relationships. Can't be bought and it can't be faked. It has to be earned. But here's the powerful part. When people trust you, they'll walk with you into the unknown. They'll forgive mistakes. They'll root for your success. They'll promote your cause not because they were asked but because they believe in the same thing you do. That's what great leaders unlock. That's what starting with why does. Sinek tells us, think about the leaders and companies you admire most. Think about the brands you're loyal to, the movements you support, the people you'd follow even into uncertainty. Odds are you trust them, not because they offered you a discount or a prize, but because you sense something real, a belief, a value, a purpose that resonates. When someone communicates from the inside out, from why to how to what, they speak directly to our emotional core. It's not about manipulation. It's about connection. And that connection is what turns customers into advocates, employees into evangelists, and companies into cultures. So what's the real difference between carrots and sticks leadership and starting with why? It's the difference between transaction and transformation. One makes a sale. The other makes a legacy. And Sinek is clear. Manipulation might get you through this quarter, but only a clear, authentic why will get you through this decade. As Chapter 2 closes, we're left with a question that every business, every leader, every creative must answer. Are you playing the short game of motivation? Or are you building the long game of trust? Because the world is full of carrots and sticks. What it's missing desperately is leaders who inspire. Chapter 3, The Golden Circle. Imagine peeling back the layers of a company, a movement, a message until you reach the core. What would you find? Most people think they start with the right things: a great product, a clever marketing angle, a well-structured business plan. But in Chapter 3, Simon Sinek introduces a deceptively simple model that explains why some leaders inspire and others don't. A model he calls the Golden Circle. At first glance, the Golden Circle looks like 3 concentric rings: why, how, and what. Every person and organization on the planet knows what they do. That's the easy part: your job title, your product, your service, your goals. A smaller number of people can tell you how they do it. That's their process, their proprietary system, their strengths. But very, very few can clearly articulate why they do what they do. And yet, says Sinek, the great leaders, the ones who truly inspire, start with why. Apple, Martin Luther King Jr., the Wright brothers. These are people and organizations that moved from the inside out. They began with belief, not product. They began with purpose, not performance metrics. And the result? Loyalty that went far beyond rational logic. They didn't just have customers. They had followers. When Apple launches a product, they don't say, "We make great computers." They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? That would be starting with what? Instead, they say, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. And we just happen to make great computers. Want to join us? That's the magic of starting with why. It doesn't appeal to logic, it appeals to something deeper. The limbic brain, the part of us that processes feelings like trust, loyalty, and decision-making, is the reason why we often make gut decisions that feel right, even when we can't explain them. This is the biological basis of inspiration. The golden circle aligns with how our brains are wired. The outer circle, what, corresponds with the neocortex, the rational analytical part of the brain. But the inner circles, why and how, align with the limbic brain, which controls emotion and behavior. When we communicate from the outside in, we speak to the rational mind. But when we communicate from the inside out, we speak to people's hearts. And hearts, Sinek reminds us, are what move people to action. So why do most companies still communicate from the outside in? Because it's easier. It's easier to sell features than to define a mission. It's easier to lead with specs than with soul. But ease is not the goal. Inspiration is. And this model isn't limited to companies or public figures. It applies to you, the entrepreneur, the artist, the teacher, the leader. If you want to build something that lasts, something people believe in, you have to begin with your why. That doesn't mean you ignore what or how. It means you lead with the belief that drives it all. It means you know your cause, your reason, your fire, and you let that clarity inform every decision you make. This is the power of the golden circle. It explains why some brands feel like movements, why some speeches stay with us for years, why some leaders draw people in without coercion, pressure, or gimmicks. They don't manipulate. They don't chase trends. They lead with purpose. They start with why. And that, Sinek tells us, is the beginning of real influence. Chapter 4. This is not opinion, this is biology. By now, Simon Sinek has made something clear. Starting with why isn't just a nice leadership theory. It's a deep biological truth. In Chapter 4, he takes us beneath the surface of behavior and decision-making, and shows us what's really going on inside us. And it's not just psychology, it's biology. When we hear a compelling message, when we feel drawn to a cause or connected to a leader, we often say things like, "It just felt right." That phrase, "felt right," holds more truth than we realize. Because what Sinek lays out here is this. Human decision-making is driven by the limbic brain, the part of the brain that has no capacity for language but governs our emotions, behavior, and decisions. The limbic brain is at the center of the golden circle. It's the part of us that connects with the why. So when a leader or a company communicates their purpose, their belief, their deeper reason for existing, they're not appealing to logic. They're communicating directly with the part of our brain that governs trust and loyalty. It explains why we sometimes can't explain our decisions, why we choose one product over another, one person over another, even when they seem equal on paper. It's because the decision didn't come from facts, it came from feeling. And feelings, Sinek reminds us, originate in biology, not in spreadsheets. Let's take a real-world example. The Wright brothers. They had no money, no college education, and no corporate backing. But they had a powerful why. They believed that if they could build a machine that could fly, it would change the world. Contrast that with Samuel Pierpont Langley, a highly respected scientist with deep government funding and a team of top minds. He was chasing fame and fortune, not purpose. And when the Wright brothers succeeded first, Langley gave up completely. Why? Because he was in it for the outcome. They were in it for the cause. The difference wasn't in skill or resources. It was in motivation, in belief, in why. This chapter forces us to reflect. How often do we try to convince others with logic, hoping our carefully crafted arguments will change minds? When in fact, trust is not built through reasoning. It's built through resonance. People don't want to be convinced. They want to feel understood. And that's why starting with why works. It speaks to the part of us that's looking for alignment, not just answers. Sinek pushes this even further. He tells us that clarity of why leads to discipline of how and consistency of what. But without that clarity, without something deeper anchoring our message, we're just reacting, just throwing strategies at the wall and hoping one sticks. The truly great brands, movements, and leaders don't do that. They don't guess. They connect. And they do it by speaking to the limbic brain through values, emotion, and belief, not features or price points. This is the biology of trust, the invisible thread between purpose and persuasion. The reason some ideas spread like wildfire, and others fade, no matter how well-funded or polished they seem. So here's the truth that Chapter 4 leaves us with. If you want to inspire action, don't talk to the mind. Talk to the heart. Because that's where decisions are made. That's where loyalty is born. And that's where every world-changing why begins. Chapter 5. Clarity, Discipline, and Consistency. By now, we know the power of starting with why. But Simon Sinek is quick to remind us. Having a why isn't enough. You have to live it. In Chapter 5, he walks us through the framework that separates companies who say they have a mission from those who live and lead with it every single day. The difference comes down to 3 essential traits: clarity of why, discipline of how, and consistency of what. Let's start with clarity. This is the foundation. If you don't know your why, your core belief, your reason for being, how can you expect anyone else to follow you? Clarity isn't about slogans or taglines. It's about a deeply rooted understanding of who you are, what you stand for, and what you will never compromise on. Sinek gives us Apple again as the poster child. Apple doesn't just say it thinks differently, it actually builds products, teams, and cultures around that belief. They don't need to shout their why. Every action reflects it. And that's the key. Clarity must come first. Without it, you're just guessing. And people can feel that uncertainty. Once the why is clear, you need discipline of how. This is about the values, principles, and guiding philosophies that bring your why to life. It's how you operate. It's how you hire. It's how you make tough decisions. Discipline is what ensures you walk your talk. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when no one's watching. Great organizations don't just define values, they live by them. Southwest Airlines, for example, doesn't just say it values employees, it builds its business model around them. When you're disciplined about your how, your belief system becomes operationalized. And when your how aligns with your why, you create something rare: integrity. And then comes the third and often most neglected piece: consistency of what. This is where your belief system meets the real world. It's the product your customers touch. It's your messaging, your marketing, your behavior. If what you do doesn't match what you believe, people notice. Because here's the thing. Trust is built through consistency. Over time, through repetition. People don't remember what you said once. They remember what you always do. And inconsistency is toxic. Causes confusion. It makes your why feel hollow. Even a single disconnect between message and action can unravel trust you've spent years building. Sinek doesn't let us off the hook here. He's saying, you can't inspire unless you're aligned. And alignment is a full-body commitment. Clarity of why, discipline of how, consistency of what. Miss one and the whole system wobbles. This is why so many brands lose their way. They start with a bold mission. But over time, the focus shifts to numbers. Growth becomes the only North Star. And the clarity that once defined them slowly fades into a diluted what. When that happens, customers don't just walk away, they feel betrayed. Because we don't follow products. We follow beliefs. This chapter challenges us, whether we're leading a company, a cause, or just our own lives, to take stock. Is our what aligned with our why? Do our actions reinforce our beliefs or contradict them? Because the people who inspire us, truly inspire us, are the ones who show up the same way again and again. Who say what they mean and mean what they say. Who have the clarity, the discipline, and the consistency to make their why not just a message but a reality. In the end, Chapter 5 is a call to integrity. It says, don't just declare your why. Live it. Build it. Be it. Every single day. Chapter 6. The Emergence of Trust. In a world overflowing with options, where products compete not just on features but on identity, there's one quality that cuts through all the noise: trust. In Chapter 6, Simon Sinek peels back another layer of inspired leadership and shows us how trust isn't built on charisma, clever branding, or even success. Trust, he says, emerges when people sense that you are who you say you are. Not once, not sometimes, but always. This chapter is about credibility through consistency. You cannot ask people to follow you or to buy from you if your message shifts with the wind or only shows up when it's convenient. Trust is not a marketing strategy. It is earned over time through the choices you make, especially when no one is watching. It's what happens when your actions align with your beliefs again and again, until people know what to expect from you, because you've already proven it. Sinek offers a striking analogy. Trust is like lubrication. When it's present, everything moves more smoothly. Conversations are easier, decisions are faster, relationships are deeper. Without it, everything grinds. People become skeptical, defensive. They stop sharing ideas. They guard themselves. Without trust, teams fracture. Organizations crumble. Customers drift. And here's the twist. Trust doesn't come from being perfect. Comes from being predictable. From showing up with the same values in every room, on every call, in every decision. That kind of alignment is what makes people feel safe. Because they know what you stand for. They know where you draw the line. And in a world where most things feel uncertain, that kind of steadiness is magnetic. Great leaders, Sinek says, are like lighthouses. They don't chase ships. They don't change based on the tide. They stand tall, clear, and unshakable in their purpose. And in doing so, they earn the trust of those navigating stormy waters. He takes us inside the business world again, pointing to leaders like Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines. Kelleher didn't just preach values, he protected them. When hard decisions had to be made, like budget cuts or layoffs, he chose in ways that reinforced the company's why. He put people first. Not because it was convenient, but because it was consistent with the belief system that made the company what it was. And people noticed. Employees didn't just work for him, they believed in him. They trusted him. Contrast that with the typical corporate leader who makes values sound like empty bullet points in a PowerPoint presentation, while behaving in ways that betray every word. The result? Cynicism. Eye rolls. Quiet quitting. Because people don't trust brands or leaders who talk one way and act another. But the real beauty of this chapter is how it brings trust down to a human level. Sinek reminds us that trust is not just a leadership issue. It's a relationship issue, a parenting issue, a friendship issue. Whether you're building a team or a marriage, the question is always the same. Do your actions match your beliefs? When people trust you, they'll follow you into uncertainty. They'll forgive your mistakes. They'll stand beside you, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Chapter 6 ends not with a grand strategy, but with something far more grounding. Be who you say you are. Always. That's how trust emerges. And that's how inspiration begins. Chapter 7, How a Tipping Point Tips. In Chapter 7, Simon Sinek shifts gears. He moves from the biology of decision-making and the soul of trust to something more visible, more cultural. He begins to answer the burning question many leaders have. How does an idea spread? How does a belief, once sparked, move from the early adopters into the hearts of the masses? The answer lies in something Malcolm Gladwell once called the tipping point. But Sinek takes that concept and grounds it in the world of the golden circle. At the center of every movement, every successful product, every surge in adoption, there is a core group of people who believe deeply, not because they were sold to, but because they felt something. Sinek calls these the early adopters and innovators. They're not driven by logic or proof. They are driven by belief. These people, the first 2.5% innovators, and the next 13.5% early adopters, are the lifeblood of any big idea. They don't need you to have all the answers. They don't demand perfection. What they want is meaning. They buy with their hearts. They support with their loyalty. They aren't asking, is this product better? They're asking, does this speak to who I am? This is where most organizations miss the mark. They go straight to the masses, to the late adopters and the skeptics. They focus on numbers, not belief. But Sinek warns, those people won't move until the tipping point is reached. Until they see that others have gone first. That's human nature. Most people don't like being first. They wait for proof. For popularity. But they won't see that proof unless someone lights the fire. That fire is belief. So what tips a tipping point? Not clever advertising. Not discounts. Not features. It's alignment. It's when the clarity of why, your purpose, is so strong, and your message is so consistent, that the early believers can feel it. They become your evangelists. They share your message not because you paid them to, but because they want to. Because it's part of who they are. Sinek illustrates this with the iPod. Apple didn't say, we have a 1 gigabyte MP3 player. That's what everyone else said. Apple said, 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's a message that speaks to the limbic brain. It's emotional. It connects to a deeper lifestyle, a belief about simplicity, elegance, and control. And guess what? The early adopters heard it. They believed it. And they spread it. From there, the tipping point did what it always does, it tipped. This chapter is a powerful reminder that mass appeal never starts with the masses. It starts with the few who care deeply. And those few won't follow unless they believe you're like them. That you see the world the way they do. That your why matches theirs. So if you're trying to spark a movement, a business, a revolution, don't focus on being liked by everyone. Focus on being crystal clear to someone. Because when that small group starts to feel seen, really seen, they'll do the spreading for you. They'll tell the world. And when they do, the rest will follow. That's how a tipping point tips. It's not magic. It's belief made contagious. Chapter 8, Start with Why but Know How. In Chapter 8, Simon Sinek introduces an often overlooked truth. While the why is the origin, the driving force, and the spark that inspires action, it is not enough on its own. A vision with no plan remains a dream, and a belief without structure never scales. Which is why this chapter is all about the balance between why and how. Sinek points to something critical. All great leaders need help. No matter how powerful their vision, they cannot build a movement, a business, or a lasting legacy alone. They need people who know how to bring that vision to life. This is the role of the second in command. The implementers. The builders. The ones who translate a founder's passion into daily, repeatable action. Take Walt Disney, for example. He was the why, the dreamer, the visionary. But it was his brother Roy Disney who was the how. Roy handled the operations, the money, the execution. Without Roy, there would be no Disney company. Walt could dream it. Roy made it real. That balance between vision and execution is not just helpful. It's essential. The same was true with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Jobs had the dream. Wozniak had the technical genius. Jobs could see what didn't exist yet. Wozniak could build it. Together, they didn't just make computers, they made culture. Sinek reminds us. Visionaries inspire us, but it's the implementers who make us believe it's possible. One without the other leads to frustration. Vision without structure leads to chaos. Structure without vision leads to stagnation. That's why understanding your role, whether you are the why or the how, is so important. And it's also why leaders must surround themselves with the right people. Those who can fill in the gaps, balance their blind spots, and keep the why alive through practical action. But here's the catch. The how must align with the why. If you bring in people who are brilliant at executing but don't share the belief, the system collapses. It becomes efficient but soulless, profitable but uninspiring, consistent but cold. Which is why hiring for belief, not just skill, is key. You can teach someone a system. You can't teach them to care. So when leaders start with why, they must also protect it fiercely. They must choose hows, partners, employees, strategies that don't just get the job done but get the purpose. Because the how shapes the culture. And culture, in the end, determines longevity. This chapter is a quiet but powerful turning point in the book. It expands the focus from personal belief to organizational alignment. It urges us not to stop at inspiration but to ask, who is helping me bring this to life? And do they believe what I believe? Because movements aren't just built on ideas. They're built on trust. And trust only happens when why and how walk together. So the message of Chapter 8 is clear. Start with why but don't stop there. Know how. Choose how. Protect how. Because it's not just what you believe. It's how you build it that makes it last. Chapter 9, Know why. Know how. Then what? Every movement, every cause, every lasting business has something people can see. Something tangible. That's the what. But Simon Sinek reminds us in this chapter that the what must never stand alone. If it isn't rooted in the deeper purpose, the why, and grounded in the consistent methods, the how, then it becomes just another product, just another service, just more noise in a crowded world. The problem, he explains, is that too many leaders and organizations start from the outside in. They define themselves by what they do. We make great computers. We offer consulting. We design clothes. The message is almost always product first. Logical. Straightforward. But not inspiring. Because when you begin with what, you're not giving people a reason to care. You're just giving them information. But great leaders, those who inspire action and loyalty, start from the inside out. They begin with a clear and deeply held belief. That's the why. From there, they identify the values and principles that guide how they bring that belief to life. And finally, the what, the output, is just the proof, the evidence, the result of living their beliefs out loud. Sinek reminds us that this pattern isn't philosophy, it's biology. The golden circle actually maps onto the structure of the human brain. The neocortex, responsible for rational thought, matches the what. The limbic brain, where decision-making and emotion live, corresponds to the how and why. So when leaders speak from the outside in, they're appealing to the rational mind but not touching the emotional core. And we don't make decisions based on data. We make them based on feelings and then justify them with data. The what must match the why, or the whole system breaks down. Take Apple again. They don't market themselves as a company that builds computers. That's what they do. But the reason they've built such fanatical loyalty is because of what they believe. Apple's why is to challenge the status quo, to think differently. Their how is elegant design, intuitive user experience, and tightly integrated systems. And their what, their computers, phones, and music devices, are just the clearest, most visible expression of that belief. That alignment is what makes Apple feel like a cause, not just a brand. And when the what is aligned with the why, customers don't just buy, they belong. Sinek takes this a step further and explains what happens when the alignment starts to slip. If your what doesn't reflect your why, people notice. Maybe not consciously, but they feel it. A brand might still look successful on the surface, but it starts to lose its sense of identity. Customers feel confused. Employees feel disconnected. Trust erodes. He gives the example of Volkswagen, who once positioned themselves with the famous Think Small campaign, honest, humble, and human. But when that alignment was betrayed by scandal, it wasn't just about emissions, it was a crack in trust. The what no longer matched the why. This is why Sinek emphasizes that success isn't about what you sell, it's about what you stand for. And unless your products, services, behaviors, and branding all consistently echo that belief, your message gets diluted. You lose the emotional connection. You become just another option instead of the obvious choice. In the end, this chapter circles back to a core truth. Customers don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The what matters, yes, but only when it carries the soul of your why and the discipline of your how. If the why is your belief and the how is your behavior, then the what is your signature. It's what the world sees, holds, and experiences. When all three are in harmony, you don't just gain business. You build belief. You create movements. And you don't have to fight for attention because people already feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's the ultimate goal, not just to be seen but to be believed in. Chapter 11. When why goes fuzzy. Every great organization, every visionary leader, begins with a crystal clear sense of why. It's this sense of purpose, deeply felt and clearly articulated, that draws people in, aligns teams, and drives everything from innovation to loyalty. But in Chapter 11, Simon Sinek issues a warning. Over time, even the strongest why can become fuzzy. It doesn't happen all at once. The erosion is slow, quiet, even logical. It begins when success arrives. A company grows. The team expands. The market responds. And in the pursuit of managing all the moving parts, operations, profits, efficiency, the original why can fade into the background. The focus shifts from inspiration to performance, from cause to quarterly results. And that's when things begin to unravel. Sinek explains that managing success is often harder than creating it. Why? Because when a company is small or young, its why is its identity. Everyone knows it. Everyone breathes it. It's the reason they show up, the story they tell, the fuel behind the long nights and risky decisions. But as the organization scales, new people come in. Processes tighten. Priorities shift. Soon decisions are made based on expediency, not belief. The what and how are optimized, but the why is no longer the centerpiece. It's treated as something abstract. Something nice to have, not need to protect. This is when companies lose their soul. Sinek gives the example of Walmart. Sam Walton's original why was to serve communities and help people live better by offering them low prices. He built Walmart with a genuine human-centered mission. He visited stores personally. He treated employees like partners. His belief wasn't just about profit, it was about people. But after his death, the company began to drift. The focus turned almost entirely toward cost-cutting and expansion. The why, the mission to serve, got lost in the obsession with operational efficiency. Suddenly, Walmart wasn't a company that existed to uplift. It became known as a corporate giant focused on squeezing suppliers and underpaying workers. The what remained, but the why had faded. And people noticed. This is what happens when the golden circle gets flipped. When the what becomes the driving force instead of the outcome. And it's not just damaging, it's dangerous. Because people stop believing. Customers no longer feel emotionally connected. Employees become disengaged. The trust that built the foundation begins to crumble. So how do organizations protect their why? Sinek offers a powerful insight. Clarity of why must be maintained at every level, not just at the top. Leadership is responsible for constantly communicating, reinforcing, and protecting the company's purpose. But it must also be embodied in behavior, lived out in hiring decisions, marketing campaigns, and customer service. You don't just write your why on the wall. You embed it into your culture. You remind people not just what they're doing but why it matters. And for individuals, the same rule applies. If you started something, a business, a project, a career, with a deep sense of meaning, don't let the demands of execution crowd out your original belief. The hustle, the metrics, the busy work, these are all important. But they're not your purpose. They're only valid when they serve the why. Sinek urges us, don't lose your center. Don't trade your cause for comfort. Because once the why gets fuzzy, the soul begins to fade. So chapter 11 is both a reflection and a warning. A reminder that the most powerful question we can ask isn't, what should we do next? But does this serve our why? Because when the why is clear and protected, the how remains disciplined. And the what becomes inspiring. Chapter 12, split happens. There comes a moment in the life of nearly every successful organization when the internal drive that once propelled it forward begins to splinter. The clarity that once unified everyone, the shared purpose, the rallying cry, the deep sense of belief, starts to feel more like a memory than a mission. In chapter 12, Simon Sinek calls this quiet unraveling the split. It's not marked by a single event. It's not a scandal or a public meltdown. It's far more subtle, and therefore more dangerous. It happens when an organization begins to separate what it does from why it does it. The split is the slow, steady drift away from purpose in favor of productivity. It's when performance becomes the goal instead of the byproduct of inspiration. And over time, the feeling that made the company or movement magnetic begins to evaporate. Sinek explains this phenomenon by comparing it to a biological system. In the early stages, a company's founder is like the limbic brain, the keeper of instinct, emotion, and clarity of purpose. The founder knows why the organization exists. Decisions are made based on gut, on belief. And those who join early on buy into the mission, not just the product. Everyone is aligned. Everyone is emotionally invested. But then growth happens. The company expands. Structures are put in place. Operations scale. And suddenly new leaders are hired, not because they believe in the why, but because they're good at managing the what. They're numbers people, process people, the kind who can execute. Slowly, the organization begins to favor logic over belief. The why becomes less central, while efficiency and outcomes take center stage. This is the split. And once the split sets in, something critical happens. The organization stops feeling like it used to. Employees may still do their jobs. Products may still sell. But the magic, the loyalty, the sense of belonging, the emotional resonance begins to fade. Sinek offers a powerful insight here. Most organizations don't die because they lose money. They die because they lose belief. They lose trust. They lose meaning. And once that is gone, even the best strategies can't fix the disconnection. The good news is, the split is not irreversible. But healing it requires more than just a rebranding or an internal memo. It requires leaders to pause, reflect, and reconnect with the why. It requires a return to purpose, not just in words but in action. Sinek points out that when leaders remember why they started, when they go back to the original cause that ignited them, they breathe life back into the organization. Suddenly, decisions become more human. Messaging becomes more authentic. People feel seen again. And slowly, the what and how begin to realign with the why. In this chapter, he's not just talking about companies. He's talking about movements, teams, even individuals. Anyone who has built something, whether it's a career, a mission, or a business, can experience the split. You start with purpose, but over time you may get caught up in metrics, milestones, and mechanics. You may forget why you began. But Sinek reminds us that we can always return. We can ask, does this still align with why I started? If not, it's time to recalibrate. Because only when our actions are rooted in belief do they truly inspire. So Chapter 12 isn't just a diagnosis. It's a call to leadership. A call to reunite what we do with why we do it. A call to stay anchored in the thing that made us matter in the first place. Because when split happens, reconnection is the only way forward. Chapter 13, The Origins of a Why. In Chapter 13, Simon Sinek takes us deeper, not just into the theory of leadership, but into the human heart of it. He asks a profound question. Where does a why come from? If it's so vital to inspire others, to lead movements, and to build companies that last, then surely we must understand where that sense of purpose originates. The answer, he explains, is both simple and personal. A why is born out of our past. It's the sum of our experiences, our childhood, our triumphs, our scars. It's rooted in the places we felt safe or unsafe, seen or invisible, valued or rejected. In other words, your why is not manufactured. It's discovered. It's already inside you. It's the thread that runs through everything you've ever done when you felt at your best. Most alive, most fulfilled, most connected. Sinek illustrates this beautifully with the story of the Wright brothers. They didn't have money or fame. They didn't have corporate sponsorships or scientific credentials. But what they did have was a deep-rooted belief in the power of flight to change the world. They weren't building a plane to be rich. They were chasing a cause. And because of that, their why gave them the grit to keep going long after better-funded competitors gave up. Their why carried them through failure. It gave meaning to the hardship. In contrast, Samuel Pierpont Langley, backed by the government and cheered by the press, had all the funding and talent he could ask for. But he lacked a compelling why. He wanted to be first. He wanted fame. His goal was personal gain, not service. So when the Wright brothers succeeded, he simply quit. Because the outcome, being the first to fly, was no longer available to him. His motivation had no depth. The takeaway is powerful. When our why is grounded in something bigger than ourselves, we don't give up when the road gets hard. We adapt. We persist. Because we're driven by meaning, not ego. Sinek also explores how a company's why usually comes from its founder. He explains that founders embed their own personal sense of purpose into the DNA of the organization. And as the company grows, the challenge becomes maintaining that sense of identity, ensuring that the why doesn't get diluted or forgotten as more people come on board. It's why the founder's story matters so much. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. His why didn't begin on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. It came from years of personal conviction, pain, faith, and struggle. His childhood, his education, his sense of justice, all of it shaped the belief that one day equality could be reality. That's why when he stood in front of thousands and said, "I have a dream," people didn't just hear words, they felt purpose. Sinek encourages us not to confuse our what with our why. The job you do, the title you hold, the company you work for, that's the what. Your why lives deeper. It's the reason you're drawn to that work in the first place. Lose the job and the what may vanish, but the why remains. So how do you find it? Sinek suggests starting with this. Reflect on moments in your life when you felt most proud, most fulfilled, most alive. Then trace the common threads. What was it about those experiences that mattered to you? What did you contribute? Who did you serve? These are the raw ingredients of your why. And once you know it, you don't need to chase motivation. You'll carry it with you. Ultimately, Chapter 13 is about identity, about the deep roots of belief that make a leader more than just a title holder. It's about understanding that your why is not a marketing statement. It's your compass, your anchor, your truth. And when you lead from that place, when your life or your business flows outward from that internal clarity, you don't just attract followers. You invite believers. Chapter 14, The New Competition. In this chapter, Simon Sinek introduces a bold idea that disrupts the conventional thinking about business, leadership, and success. The goal is not to beat others at their game. It's to play your own game better. We're raised to compete. From the time we're children, we're taught that success means coming out on top. Getting the best grades, landing the best job, outperforming the competition. Businesses adopt the same mindset. They obsess over market share, rivals, and quarterly wins. Leaders talk in terms of defeating the competition, capturing attention, and crushing the numbers. But Sinek invites us to consider something deeper. What if the real victory isn't about winning against others, but staying true to why you started in the first place? According to Sinek, great leaders and companies don't define success in relation to others. They define it in relation to their purpose. Instead of asking, how can we be better than them? They ask, how can we better express our why? They are not fixated on comparisons, they're focused on consistency of cause. And ironically, this is what makes them so magnetic. Sinek illustrates this with Apple once again. When Microsoft launched the Zune, their answer to the iPod, it was technically impressive. More features, more colors. In many ways, it outperformed Apple's device on paper. But it failed to capture hearts. Why? Because Microsoft was playing catch-up. They were chasing Apple's what, not leading with their own why. Apple, on the other hand, wasn't obsessed with being better than Microsoft. They were focused on expressing their identity, challenging the status quo, thinking differently, empowering the creative spirit. The iPod wasn't just a music player. It was a tool of expression, a symbol of individuality, and that emotional resonance can't be copied because it isn't about the features, it's about the feeling. Sinek reminds us that when a company knows its why, it stops playing the comparison game. It no longer needs to be distracted by what others are doing. It becomes a category of one. And in that space, the only competition is with itself. Can we express our why more clearly today than we did yesterday? Can we build a product, serve a customer, or lead a team in a way that brings us closer to our core belief? This shift from rivalry to relevance also changes how teams work internally. In traditional competition-based models, departments compete for budget, recognition, and influence. But in a why-driven organization, the focus isn't on internal victories, it's on collective alignment. Everyone is pulling in the same direction. And because of that, innovation flourishes, collaboration improves, trust deepens. Sinek argues that the companies and leaders who win in the long run aren't necessarily the most aggressive or efficient. They are the most authentic. They are the ones who refuse to sacrifice their values for temporary gain. They're not chasing the market, they're shaping it. They're not trying to fit in, they're creating something people want to belong to. The new competition, then, is not external, it's internal. It's the daily challenge to show up with integrity, to stay connected to purpose even when profits dip, to avoid the temptation of shortcuts, hype, and ego, and to remember that the goal is not simply to grow, it's to grow in the right direction. Chapter 14 is a powerful call to redefine success, not by numbers alone but by meaning. It asks us to stop benchmarking against others and instead build lives, companies, and legacies around the things we believe in most. Because in the end, the only lasting edge is authenticity. And when you lead with why, you stop competing. You start inspiring.